Welcome to the podcast and the show. I am Chris Graham. We've got Scott German with us here. We're going to talk about the UVA basketball program by and large here on the show. Virginia's win 63-50 last night over number 22 NC State. Going into that one, Scott, State had won 8 of 9. Virginia, hadn't looked good on defense for a while, had lost the game at Virginia Tech. I don't know about you, but I was a little leery going into that game last night from a Virginia fan perspective. And then to see Virginia play as well as they did, they took control early and really never got off the throttle. That was an impressive win for Virginia.
Oh, absolutely. I don't know if I would say unexpected, because I don't think you can ever say that about a Tony Bennett coach team. Seems to be able to put a bad game behind him pretty quickly. He's done it multiple times. But State definitely was the hottest team in the ACC. I didn't expect it to be that easy. Not that it was that easy, but State never really. I think after the halftime deficit, I don't think they got within 9, did they? Maybe
9.
8.
9 was as close as they got on the scoreboard. Yeah.
And I don't know. We kind of talk on press row a little bit. I never really felt that uneasy about it. It's a little, at times I felt like, okay, we got to have a stop, got to have a basket. We always did.
Casey Morsell had a wide open 3. He had made 4 of 8 to that stretch from 3. And a wide open 3 when the game was at 10 points in the last maybe 4 minutes or so. It rimmed out. I mean, he had it. It was on line. As that shot was in the air, that's the only moment I felt uneasy, just because he had been making so many shots in the second half. But other than that,
that shot probably took about 3 or 4 seconds or less, maybe, but it seemed like it took about 3 or 4 minutes to slow motion. You could,
gave us too much time to think there.
Yeah. If that shot had gone, then the whole complexion of that game could have changed.
Yeah, because right after that, I think Beekman hit a layup on a nice pass, I think from Clark on a backdoor drive. Then NC State missed a shot, and Isaac McKneely hit a 3. So within like 45 seconds of Morsell's shot rimming out that would have made it a 7-point game, it was a 15-point game. Game was over. But yeah, just for that brief moment, that's the only time, and that still would have just been a 7-point game. It's not like that would have got State within a couple of possessions or anything. But that said, Virginia got to a big lead early and controlled. And let me just say it this way too. NC State, when I was looking back through after the game last night, they scored 50 points in the game. It was 63-50 final. State had come in averaging just under 80 a game. They still are tied for the ACC lead, even with 50 points last night. They had scored in 24 games. They had scored in the 60s just 3 times. And so, I mean, that's an offense. That's a team that puts up points in bunches. They had 20 in the first half. They had to be frustrated as heck. And from a Virginia defense that had not been playing Tony Bennett level defense for a while, to come out all of a sudden and look like, gosh, the best of the Malcolm Brogdon, Justin Anderson era. That's what's impressive. Is it from two games ago or 2 days ago, the loss to Virginia Tech. Virginia just couldn't get stops in that game to save their lives. To go from the way they played against Tech and then to play defensively the way they did last night, that's impressive.
Yeah, and I think if you dig a little deeper into the bones of the game, I think there's 2 themes that we could agree upon. One, rumors to the demise of Kadin Shedrick, or just that, rumors. He bounced back last night in a huge way. And Isaac McKneely, the blocking machine.
The 6'4" perimeter shooting guard with the block of the night on a dunk attempt with about 3 minutes to go. That one itself would have made it an 8-point game. So things turned around from there. And so, yeah, let's talk about Shedrick first, because McKneely, that was one play, impressive play. But Shedrick had been on the bench. He started 14 of the first 15 games, and then when Tony Bennett was looking for a spark in the North Carolina game back on January 10th, he went to Ben Vanderplas in the second half as the 5 with a small ball lineup. It worked. He stayed with Vanderplas. To this stage, Vanderplas is still the starter until Saturday. We'll find out if he starts on Saturday. I'd be surprised. But the offense was really clicking. The defense wasn't. I mean, we talked about how impressive it was, Scott, that Tony Bennett was sacrificing defense for offense, but it worked. It fueled that long winning streak until the Tech game on Saturday. But Kadin Shedrick went from starting he was leading the ACC in adjusted box plus minus. He was leading the ACC in defensive rating and defensive box plus minus. He basically all those nerd stats that people like us like. Kadin Shedrick was among the ACC leaders. From a metric standpoint, could have been among the top contenders for Player of the Year. And then he doesn't play. He literally did not get off the bench against Virginia Tech. And Tony would say it after games. Reporters would ask him. You're down there in the media room. Reporters would ask, some version of, without saying these words in the same order, is Kadin Shedrick in the doghouse? And Tony would say, "Nah, he's we might need him down the stretch and that kind of thing." But he came in last night, played 26 minutes, had 10.6 rebounds. It's like he never left. That's the amazing thing to me. It was like he was never gone.
Yeah, it's like you just forget that he was a DNP against Virginia Tech, did not play. CD, coach's decision.
Healthy scratch. He was
a healthy scratch, however you want to say it. But he just picked up. So are you of the mindset, and I believe I am, that if Virginia's going to make a deep run in the NCAA tournament, and by deep run, I mean win at least 4 games, which will
get you to the Final Four.
Which would get you to the Final Four. To make a deep run, I think it's got to be the lineup that we saw predominantly last night with Shedrick in there. I don't see that small ball being able to win 4 straight games in the NCAA tournament.
Well, maybe I'll throw it this way. Yeah, I think that if you think about some of the matchups you'd have to have if you make a deep run, Virginia is not beating Purdue with that 7-4 monster who no one can guard at the college level. There might not be teams in the NBA that can guard that guy. He's that good. But Virginia is not going to compete with Purdue with Ben Vanderplas. No offense to Ben Vanderplas, but at 6'8", guarding a 7'4", a big 7'4", mobile 7'4" guy. But there may be games where, whether he starts or he's getting a lot of starter type minutes, that you might want to go with a smaller lineup against, a team that has a team that itself has a 4-guard lineup with a small center. You may actually want more minutes for a Vanderplas. So, I'm not against saying that Vanderplas shouldn't start ever again this season for Virginia. But I think that Shedrick should probably be penciled in as a starter. And then you adjust from there if you need to, because I'm thinking of there was a game in the 2017 NCAA tournament that Virginia team played a UNC Wilmington team, ironically coached by Kevin Keats, who's now NC State's coach. That North Carolina Wilmington team started 4 guards, and their center was like a 6'5" guy. You may actually want a smaller lineup. You may actually want a 4-guard lineup with Vanderplas as your center to counter that. Or maybe even a 4-guard lineup with Gardner as your center, Jaden Gardner as your center. Who knows? But I think when you play conventionally, Duke on Saturday. So Carolina coming up in a week or two. You're going to probably want Shedrick starting at center.
Yeah, I don't think we've seen the last of Vanderplas, but I think Tony's going to really have to tweak his effectiveness, and I think he's going to be most effective in just situations.
Yeah, situations or maybe a game. We've been getting Vander minus. We had been getting a lot of Vander.
Yeah, I love that, by the way, too.
Yeah, I'm stealing it from someone who suggested it on our website, but we've been getting, because in the last 5 games now, he's averaging 4.2 points a game. He's had actually more games this season. This is just a crazy stat. He's had 8 games this season where he scored 3 or fewer points, 7 games in double digits. It's literally feast or famine with him And we've been getting a lot of the famine lately. And, if he's going to be the starter, he got 29 minutes against Virginia Tech, scored 0 points, and then was a liability defensively. If he's not putting up 20 points himself, he's got to either be better on the defensive end or he's got to be on the bench. And so, the fact that Shedrick was able to work through that stretch and not let it mentally get him completely torn away from this program and come back last night after sitting out the entire game against Virginia Tech and play like the Shedrick of November and December, that's a good sign for this Virginia program because, Francisco Caffaro got in the game for a few minutes against Virginia Tech. God, love the kid. He's a nice kid. I've loved talking to Caffaro, but he shouldn't be getting minutes ahead of Kadin Shedrick. There's no doubt about that.
Do you see any correlation between the inconsistency in Vanderplas and occasionally, not lately, but occasionally since he's been at Virginia, the inconsistencies that we saw with Jaden Gardner? And do you think that has anything to do with just making that big leap? Vanderplas coming from the Ohio Valley Conference, Gardner coming from
No, it was a MAC. It was
the MAC. Excuse me, the MAC. You're correct. And Gardner coming from the AAC, I guess.
Well,
which still is, you do have Houston and a couple good teams there. Night in, night out. My point is,
you're
not seeing that level of competition, and they just hit walls.
Well, I think maybe from Vanderplas this year, Gardner actually last year, I don't remember seeing a lot of what we saw to him this year inconsistency wise. And maybe that's a good opportunity to transition to talking about how great he's been playing of late, averaging over 18 points a game for his last 4 games.
Since he read his obituary on Augusta Free Press,
Well, there was that
3-game obituary.
Well, he had a 6-game stretch before this recent great stretch where he averaged 6.2 points a game, was shooting 40% from the field. Last 4 games, 18.3 points, 8 rebounds a game, and shooting 53% from the field. And Ryan Dunn, the freshman, had been earning the minutes. He had actually had more minutes per game during a 3-game stretch than Gardner did at the 4 spot. So and then that's when I wrote the column saying, hey, maybe Dunn's the starter at the 4. And then since then, I even wrote tongue in cheek last night in my observations column. Sorry, Jaden, didn't mean to offend you, but I'm, in a sense, obviously Dunn pushing him made him step his game up, and he did it. But he wasn't inconsistent that I can recall. I'm just from memory. Last year, I mean, we pretty much got, night in, night out, at least 10 points and at least a few rebounds out of him, even when he had an off night. This year, Gardner wasn't that, but I think with Vanderplas, you could be seeing that. And Vanderplas still, it's interesting. I guess getting back to him, he's, I was able to talk with him for the Jerry Ratcliffe Show podcast that we do with Jerry. And I was able to talk with him last week with Vanderplas. When he was recruited to Virginia, when he was talking with Tony Bennett, he said that, he played 5, the 5 spot at Ohio. And he said when he was being pitched to come to Virginia, the thought was he would play the 4 spot and even some 3, even some backcourt, basically. So he was slimming down. He said he had bulked up to play 5 at the MAC level. He put on 15 or 20 pounds to play the 5. And he was aiming to lose that weight so he could run more, run off screens more. And so he was thinking all along, I'm coming here to play. I'm coming here to be a shooter. And now, maybe the fact that he's been back and forth between, being a big and being a perimeter guy could be a factor in his inconsistencies as well. I wonder about that.
Yeah, he's been asked to wear a lot of different hats.
Yeah. And really from night to night, almost maybe shift to shift, to use a hockey term.
From the time he is waiting on the side court to check in.
Yeah.
His role evolves a little. Just thinking about this, maybe we are onto something. So you kind of lit a fire under Gardner, we think. And then in our preview column of the NC State game, I wrote that Tuesday night may be now or never for Kadin Shedrick.
Well, I don't know if you saw, I was writing about that last week too. I got several emails and a few texts after last night's game, to the effect of, wow, Tony must read you guys' website. Here's all I'll say to that. No, we're not smarter than Tony Bennett. We are good at guessing where Tony's going, I think is a better way to put it. It doesn't take a genius to figure out when a guy's not playing well that you need to make a change. You need to at least consider making a change. And so with Gardner, I mean, you got to think that in practice, it's intense. There's a lot of guys. There's guys who aren't even playing. I mean, there's guys like Isaac Trout and Leon Bond who are redshirting this year. Dante Adams is redshirting this semester. The Georgetown guard. That's a hell of a scout team to be going up against in practice. And so you know that Gardner felt the heat from Dunn, not just in games and not just because we wrote about it, but he was feeling it every day in practice. And, Vanderplas has to be feeling it too. And, I love the fact that Gardner stepped his game up. Shedrick stepped his game up. And, now it's Vanderplas's turn to step his game up. If all these guys, hey, if it takes writing a few angry words, Scott, I can write lots of angry words.
Yeah, I think up next we need to really turn the heat up a little bit on Armaan Franklin.
Well, yeah, I did that earlier.
There,
I did that earlier in the year. Even before his goose egg against Miami, I was throwing not throwing darts or anything, but just mentioning that he was struggling and suggesting that maybe his minutes need to be cut. And then he had a long stretch. His last two, he's obviously struggled, but he had an 8 or 9 game stretch where he was lights out. I was getting ready to say, Scott, I would think that other people in the UVA athletics department know that we're not afraid of mincing words. Carla Williams might be, for example, this week. I've had 10,000 clicks on that story I wrote about her failed effort to inject life into the football program. So, but that said, so Armaan Franklin would be the next guy. I'm trying to think, Scott, who can we use? Because we always have a foil.
Well, my foil would be.
I know who your foil is. I'm sorry.
I asked you before yesterday.
You did.
What would, if you remember, texted you.
Yes.
What did you think of a lineup that included IMAC and left out Franklin?
Starting lineup with McKneely as the starter at 3.
Yeah.
And then Franklin coming off the bench.
And Franklin coming off the bench.
Yeah, I think that it's today's Wednesday, the next game Saturday, maybe tomorrow there needs to be a column where I'll do some deep digging into the lineup efficiencies thereof.
Yeah.
McKneely,
we're not going to lose any. We're not going to lose anything defensively.
No, not at all. That
you made game.
He made the play of the game last night. The block shot on the dunk that kept the lead at 10 at that stage. He hit the 2 threes last night. Virginia only shot 8 threes. He was 2 of 5. He hit the 2 long shots, including the dagger 3 with about 2 minutes to go that ended the game essentially to end State's last little mini run. And the only problem any of us have with Isaac McKneely is that he just needs to shoot the damn ball. And he did last night. I think he shot the ball 7 times, which was over his 5.5 average. So he, if you had the over last night, you won the pony. And he's never been a liability defensively. He's been getting minutes since day 1 this season because he came in ready. He came from a high school program that played the pack line. He's been a valuable guy, even when he wasn't shooting the ball at all early in the season. He's at least shooting it some now. Even when he wasn't shooting it at all, he got on the floor because he played defense. Now he's playing defense. He's starting to shoot a little bit more. If you gave him starters minutes and if you put him out there more with that starting unit, Scott, you know this. One thing he's saying is that it's not that he doesn't want to shoot the ball. It's just he doesn't feel like he's getting the open looks. Maybe if he gets more time with Beekman and Clark and that 5-man lineup of doom, he might get more open looks as well.
Yeah, I mean, the over-under for the way Isaac has been shooting the ball, the over-under has to be higher than 8. Don't you think?
Yeah.
It would be a minimum of 10. A minimum.
Yeah. Well, minimum of 10 shots.
10 shots.
Oh, he's not getting 10 shots this year with this group, but he's because Kevin Keats isn't the coach. Last night, man, we were looking at the numbers as the game was going on. I don't know how many fans pay attention to the box score as the game is going on. Terquavion Smith leading the ACC in scoring. He had 19 points, so he actually was a little bit above his season average going in, was 18.5. It took him 20 shots to get 19 points. The second leading scorer on the team that I'm forgetting his name now. Joyner. Yes, Joyner. He came in average of 16 points a game. He had 5 points last night, 2 of 14 shooting, 2 of 14. At some point, stop shooting the ball. If it's not going in, stop shooting it.
Well, Chris, just jumping off that real quick, that didn't hurt. That didn't hurt the Appleby kid from Wake last night.
6 of 20, but he got to the line 28 times. Now, North Carolina, we didn't watch that game because it was going on as we were getting ready for the start of the UVA NC State game. But we were watching it on stat broadcast. If you can watch a game on stat broadcast, basically, we're just watching the stats accumulate. And North Carolina was trying to extend the game at the foul line. And so without having seen it, obviously what Wake Forest did was they were able to get the ball into Appleby's hands every single inbounds play. And he was 13 of 13 at the line in the last 2 minutes. So credit to him. He knocked down the shots, but 6 of 20 to get his 35 points. That's NBA-like. And I don't mean that in a positive way.
But those are typical stats that you see in an NBA game.
Well, for an elite guy in an NBA game who, and he actually he didn't have 35 points against Virginia in that loss, but he didn't do much. I think he was 4 of 16 from the field in that game. Maybe he was in double figures, but he maybe only got to the line himself 4 or 5 times. But that guy is a volume shooter as well. That's what I charitably call guys like Terquavion Smith or, Appleby, or I'm sure there are other guys out there like that. Volume shooters. That just means they shoot the ball a lot. Whether they make it a lot, going in last night, for example, Terquavion Smith leading the scorer in the ACC, 18.5 points a game, 37.5% from the field, 34.6% from three. Volume shooter. He just shoots it a lot, and eventually some of them go in. Well, so you brought that up in the context of McKneely. McKneely, 7 or 8 shots a game. The way he's shooting lately, he had a slightly off night. He was only 2 of 5. He was only 40% from 3 last night. So he's somewhere in the mid-50s in his last 9 games from 3. Mid-50s. That's all he is from 3 in his last 9 games. But if we got him, if he's shooting the ball 8 times and making 4 of them and 3 of them are threes, he's in double digits. And then if you bring Franklin off the bench, and he can be either one of those guys, if they can be the sort of microwave off the bench, like the Vinnie Johnson from the Detroit Pistons back in the 80s and 90s, if you could have either of those guys be sort of the injection of offense off the bench, Vanderplas could be the same guy. Bring Vanderplas in, use Vanderplas in spurts, use Franklin in spurts. There's worse things than having those guys providing offense instantly off the bench.
I wouldn't be surprised if that's not something we see. I'm not going to go out and just be bold to say that Franklin loses his starting job, but a couple of more performances like last night, and the more we see of Isaac, I don't know how much longer Amon can hold on to that starting position, and really doesn't matter because ultimately Tony's going to put the best lineup out there, whether they start or not. But, one thing we're talking about Isaac, and it's just going to be amazing to see his career unfold at UVA, however long it might be before the NBA gets a hold to him. We were talking after the game last night, some writers, that 3 that he hit from the side late in the game, that was cold-blooded. Yeah. And that was with a defender, pretty well guarded, I believe.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it well guarded. It was a well set up play. I thought it was one of those. Virginia was driving the baseline really well. The guard, Kie and Reese were driving the baseline really well. And I want to say that was Beekman who found him in the corner off a dribble drive into the lane. The backside defender cracked down trying to help because Reese was finishing at the rim an awful lot. He was 6 of 9 on layups last night at the rim. Layups and dunks because he had those 2 throwdowns too. And so you had to get the help. And then that left. Now, it's not like he was wide open. Somebody tried to close out. They had a hand up. Somebody ran at him with a hand up. But, as Scott, we both played competitive pickup basketball in our past. And I think there's an applicable thing here. If you're able to get into a rhythm whether there's a guy with a hand in your face or not, if you're able to shoot the ball in rhythm, that hand in the face is just window dressing. It's more like when a guy's up under you and you can't get into your rhythm with your feet and, and then get your rhythm with your arms. And, if somebody's up under you, that's a contested shot. Some guy running at you when you're able to do what you need to do, step into it, get up in the air and shoot the ball. That was a textbook shot by McKneely. But what he did well was he knocked it down, and it was a key shot in the game because, that ended the last run that NC State had, whatever run they had.
Yeah, and for a first year player to do that, that's that to me is sort of showing his DNA, that he's not going to be afraid to take those shots.
He's not, you talk with him some. He's not afraid. He's not reluctant. He's very judicious, let's just say, in his shot selection. And that's not a problem. I mean, he's and as a result, that's why he's so efficient as a offensive guy. There's not a lot of waste in him. He's not a volume shooter like Terquavion Smith, or, other guys like that. Appleby from Wake Forest. He's a guy who, when he puts it up there, it's got a really good chance of going in. He's not just throwing it towards the rim. He's not a guy who's going to heat check. He's a very humble guy. I like what Tony said last night too, though. I said after talking about McKneely, I had used this in one of my pregame columns going into last night. At this stage of a season in February, you're not a freshman anymore. And McKneely, because of all the minutes he's getting, he's certainly not a freshman. He's getting more minutes than any freshman at UVA has gotten under Tony Bennett, including Malcolm Brogdon. That tells you a lot about the trust that Tony Bennett has in Isaac McKneely.
Yeah, and it's not like he's walking out there with a team of inexperienced players. He's getting a lot of minutes with a veteran-laden team.
Yeah.
Which is even more, more a glaring statistic, is that he's out there with players that have been here 3, 4, in K.A. Clark's case, 5 years.
Yeah.
So, yeah, his future is pretty bright at Virginia.
He's averaging 21.2 minutes per game. And I want to make sure I'm not misspeaking here. Brogdon averaged 22.4 as a freshman. That team, though, was not. I mean, that was an NCAA tournament team. But they made it. That was back when Virginia was still happy to make the tournament. This is a team that has aspirations. That team. Here's some guys from that team. Now, Joe Harris was also a freshman on that team. Other than that, Mike Scott was a fifth-year senior. But then Sammy Zaglinski, Jontel Evans, Asan Sen, KT Harrell, Paul Jesperson. Those are some names I haven't really thought of in quite a while. Some of those names anyway. So, yeah, that for Malcolm to get 22.4 that year, he wasn't competing in the backcourt with a lot of guys. McKneely stealing minutes from guys who, I mean, gosh, Armand Franklin is some people have as a second-round draft pick this year. If he stays another year, maybe a first-round draft pick next year. You got Reese Beekman. If we're not going to see him in Charlottesville next year, he's going to be a first-round draft pick. He's getting minutes with guys and from guys who are legit talents, and that says a lot about that young man. So, nope, I think Scott. I tend to be the one to sign the name to it. The people sometimes the those who are inclined they get upset at me. Tomorrow I think I have to inject that into the mix and suggest the latest change in the starting lineup could be. And I'm stealing your idea, but I'll sign my name to it and take all the heat because Franklin had played well for the last couple of games, but McKneely certainly is if he's not ready already, he's soon going to be a guy who's going to start at Virginia.
The only thing that I think that could possibly save Armand from losing that starting position is that Tony just wants to strategically place Isaac in the games, and not at this late in the career, not interrupt what he's, how he's conditioned to come into a game. I don't know. Maybe that doesn't make any sense. Maybe Tony's going to play the guys that are productive. And if you look at stat broadcast sheets, the stats that we get, I'm not sure what it was last night, but it couldn't have been pretty for Amon Franklin. His plus minus.
Let's see. His numbers, I mean, his counting numbers were awful. 2 points, 0 of 5 from the field, 2 of 2 free throws, 23 minutes. McKneely played 28 minutes. So that says what you need to say. Franklin's plus minus was +1. McKneely's was +11.
Yeah, big difference.
Big difference. And, for those who, we throw these terms around. If, and I'm sure a lot of people who would be listening to our podcast, watching us on YouTube, if you've been around us enough, you know what we're talking about. But just for those who maybe don't or need a refresher, plus minus is maybe the most basic, but also maybe the most important of stats. It's not a counting stat. It's a reflection of it's literally the score when you're in the game. So what that plus 11 for McKneely is the 28 minutes he was in the game, Virginia was 11 points better than NC State. The 23 minutes that Franklin was in the game, Virginia was 1 point better than NC State. Because that doesn't just account for your points, your steals, your block shots, your rebounds or assists or whatever else. It's a reflection of, you get credit for being in the right place team defense wise. You may not get the steal or the block shot, but if you keep the pass from going out to open Casey Morsell in the corner and he can't make the three, you should get credit for that. So that plus minus really takes into account everything that you do and not just what you do from a counting number standpoint. And so, McKneely's been a guy consistently who puts up, his plus when he's on the floor. Virginia's a better team.
Yeah, that's a vital stat. I love watching that or following that because I agree with you. I think that's sort of a very strong indicator of what that player is doing to the chemistry of that team while he's on the floor.
Last night, the best plus minus was Kadin Shedrick with plus 16. I mean, that just, and his counterpart was Ben Vanderplas, who had a -3. So Virginia was 16 points better with Shedrick on the floor, and they were 3 points worse with Vanderplas on the floor. That's you got to look at those numbers. If you're a coaching staff, you got to look at those numbers. You got to know those numbers as much as or even more than field goal percentage and free throw attempts per game, etc. You got to know what impact they have when they're out there on the floor, and that's something that the whether the fans catch on to that number, coaches and there's somebody on the staff assigned to look at the analytics and tell the coaches, hey, this is the lineup that's best for us, and Shedrick last night, McKneely last night, they were key guys off the bench, helping key that win from that perspective.
Yeah, now Saturday's game is really intriguing as to what is Coach Bennett, the mad scientist, going to come up with. Duke's big. Duke's got some size, right?
They got their Filipowski is a 7-foot college version of Kevin Durant, only in the sense that he's a 7-footer who floats around and can score in the post, can score from the perimeter, can drive to the basket at 7 feet tall. Not a lot of guys in college who can do that. They're a big team, and he's an example of that. He's a 7-foot Ben Vanderplas, a 4 inches taller version of our guy, and certainly no offense to Ben, but Filipowski's a projected lottery pick, so more talented, and they're bigger across the board. But you know what, Scott? We were texting each other the other night. I wasn't even paying attention to the Duke Miami game, to be honest. Sometimes I zone out on basketball when it doesn't involve Virginia directly, and Duke got their doors blown off by Miami the other night, and my first thought wasn't, the fan in me sometimes, any night a Duke team loses a good night. It's a good night. But then I don't like them losing by 22 points. I think it was. I don't like them the next game being against Virginia, because they have 5 days to practice. They got 5 days to have whatever John Shire, whatever he's got in his coaching acumen, he's going to have it pulled out this week to try to figure out how to get that going. And I would imagine there were probably some trash cans set up around the court as they were running hard this week and that kind of thing. So no, I kind of wish they'd lost the game by 2 points at the buzzer or something like that, not by 22, because they're not going to play. They're not going to play anything near that bad I'd be surprised anyway when they come out on Saturday.
I would too, because good teams feed off of that environment, and it's going to be a raucous environment in JPJ. So I read an article today. I'll just tell you what kind of summary of what it said and see if you disagree or disagree. Duke comes to Charlottesville with its season clearly on the bubble right now. I mean, if Duke loses in Charlottesville, they don't have a lot of opportunities to improve their profile, their resume. Typical games that would boost them, they have Carolina at Chapel Hill. The Tar Heels are another team that's clearly on the bubble. Yeah. This is one of the last opportunities for Duke to get I guess they call it a quad one win. Do you think that that's really where the situation lies with Duke right now? Is this game Saturday could be make or break for the Blue Devils this year?
Carolina is on the bubble. Duke is not on the bubble right now. When I look at the metrics right now, as you were talking, I brought up the NET rankings updated as of today. Duke is 29th in the NET. So, I mean, they're still in the realm. That would be like a 7 seed, maybe an 8 seed, but probably a 7 seed right now. They've got 3 quad 1 wins. Now they got 7 quad 1 losses. They're 3-7 overall. But it's not like Carolina, I think. I'll look at them. Let's see if I can pull Carolina up real quick here. This one works pretty good. Carolina is 1-8. Their NET's 45. They're 15-9. They're 6-4 in their last 10. Carolina's on the bubble. Duke isn't on the bubble, but I mean, at this stage, though, your point was in terms of other opportunities. No, they don't have any. Carolina, they're at Carolina, so now that would be for them. That would actually be, it might be a quad 2 because Carolina's net is so low. But actually, no, it would be a quad 1 on the road for them. So, and not that matters at this stage. They're still they're playing for the difference between a 6 or a 7 seed and an 8 or a 9 seed. But no, that question you bring there though is very valid when you look at North Carolina. Boy, North Carolina. I mean, they were at this stage last year. I think it's even more pronounced from them this year. That Carolina is the one. Man, I know that we're not playing Carolina next. Virginia plays Carolina on. I'm trying to pull it up here. It's still February 25th, so still 2 weeks away. But if you're Carolina, now they got Clemson at home. That's not a quad 1 game for them at home. In fact, Clemson wouldn't be a quad. Well, Clemson would be a quad 1 on the road, but their net is 65. Clemson is actually more on a bubble than you would think. Carolina's then got Miami at home. That's another one that would not be a quad 1 opportunity for them. They would have a quad 1 opportunity at NC State, but NC State's been really good at home. NC State, we saw them last night. They didn't look good last night, but they were 8-1 going into last night in their last 9 games. Then it's Notre Dame, Virginia, Florida State, and Duke. Carolina cannot afford really any hiccups. And next week, they got Clemson and Miami, both at home. They can't lose either one of those games, Scott, I don't think. And then, then they're at NC State. Can't afford a hiccup at Notre Dame. Notre Dame, a low ACC team this year. They got us coming into 25th. Florida State at Florida State. Florida State's won some games down there, and then they got Duke. Scott, man, I'm not going to be surprised if Carolina doesn't make the tournament this year.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at if you just get the pencil out and look at each game,
yeah,
you're looking at easily capable of losing 3 to 4 more games before the ACC tournament.
Yeah, I'll pull up Ken Palm right now real quick. One thing I like about the Ken Palm site is, you get the projections for each game. They are, I'm looking at us. That's why I'm getting the wrong thing here. Carolina would actually be favored in 6 of their last 7, but that includes being a 1-point favorite against Virginia and a slight favorite against Miami at home, and then a slight favorite against Duke at home. And so those are 3 of them, and they're favored to lose at NC State. if they go 6-1 down the stretch, that's 21-10. They're in. If they go 4-3 down the stretch, if they have a couple of hiccups there,
the ACC
they might have to win the ACC tournament this year. So, but getting back to Duke, then, the game this weekend. I mean, this year I've not paid as much attention, or I've really not paid any attention to Duke this year as I usually do each year, because Duke is usually, it's the last several years the ACC's been a Duke and Virginia year. Not last year, Virginia fell off last year, but for a number of years it was a Duke ACC league, and we had to figure out. We knew what we had to bring, and then we had to figure out what Duke had to bring. I don't get that feeling from this year's team, Scott. You might not either. I don't feel this Duke team. We were talking about this on press row last night before our game. When you recruit a new roster every year, some years you get Zion Williamson and RJ Barrett and Cam Reddish, and some years you get what they got this year, which is, a bunch of guys who probably could stand to use an extra year or two after this year to season and get better. And they're not going to have that because they replace them every year. So when you go feast or famine, sometimes you get famine. I don't know if this is quite famine, but it's not what Duke fans, the fickle as they may be, come to expect out of the one and dones. This is not a vintage Duke one and done team. This is, from a standpoint of NCAA tournament, one and done probably applies, because this is the kind of Duke team that gets in the NCAA tournament, loses one game, loses its first game, and goes home.
Yeah, and throw in the fact they have a first-year coach,
right?
Who the verdict is still way out on whether or not he can, Coach Krzyzewski, who's thought to be one of the greatest coaches of all time. He didn't have a great record of blending for these one and dones.
Right.
So it's not easy to do.
He won one championship in the one and done era before he left. And, you bring up the fact that Shire's a first-year coach. I'm getting ready. I'm still writing more about the UVA football program, and I'm going to bring it and make it make sense in a second. But I was working on some notes today from Coach Elliott's press conference from last week, where he talked about all the lessons that he got from being in year one of his being a head coach. He'd never been a head coach anywhere. He'd been a coordinator for a two-time national champion. He called the plays offensively for a team that won the national championship twice. And so he talked about, though, like moving over to the big chair, and how there are things that he did not presume to be issues. For example, just the day-to-day responsibilities of being the administrator. You're not a coach 100% of the time. You're a coach some X% of the time that's nowhere close to 100%. You're dealing with paperwork issues. Mm-hmm. You're dealing with, instead of coaching, wide receivers or coaching quarterbacks or running backs, you don't have the day-to-day touch with the players. Now, at the college basketball level, there's only 15 guys on the team. Maybe there's less of that, but there's certainly the administrative stuff. I'm the guy who, when John Shire was sitting beside Coach K, he didn't have to have the answers. He could suggest things in the huddle during a game when things weren't working and say to Coach K, "Hey, I think this might work." But Coach K saw it for 50 years. He could take John Shire's suggestion, or he could say, "John, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm going to do this." Well, now there's nobody like even close to the level of experience of a Coach K sitting in the huddle with John Shire, telling him, "Hey, I saw this happen in 1984. Let's try this strategy." He at 34 years old is the smartest guy in the room, and that's Coach K. Love him or hate him, UVA fans love to hate him. He saw it all. He saw it all in all those years at Duke, and he could pull from the mental memory banks and devise something on the fly that you just can't expect a guy like John Shire to do. And that said, they're struggling this year for Duke. They're 17-7, but they're struggling. And obviously they got blown out by Miami on the road. They got blown out a few weeks ago by NC State in Raleigh. We didn't see Coach K teams get blown out. We saw them lose games. They didn't get beat the way when this Duke team loses, they can lose spectacularly. We never saw, at least, the decent Duke teams, good Duke teams of Coach K. We didn't see that happen in the last few years. That's been a surprise to me.
Yeah. And, can say almost the same. You can almost use that same spiel in Carolina.
Yeah. Yeah.
You could
Huber
just
was never a head
Hubert
coach
Davis.
until he got this job. Right.
Right. Just insert Hubert Davis instead of John Shire. He's got a little more experience at Carolina, but still, until you're wearing, until that's your job, you can't rehearse for it.
Right.
You cannot rehearse.
When you're sitting in the big chair, everybody's looking at you for answers. When you're one of the guys, even if you're in the next chair over, you're looking at someone else. You're not the one everybody's looking at. You're one of the other people looking at in the case of Hubert Davis, Roy Williams, the case of John Shire, Mike Krzyzewski, and you can't overstate how not having those guys in the huddle isn't a big departure for them. So yeah, I'll just get back to. I haven't studied Duke yet. I'll do that tomorrow. To study their roster and study how they're getting their points and how they play defense and that kind of thing this year versus previous years. But I just don't like, this is just the looking through the glass kind of thing. I don't like that they're coming off of a blowout loss because whatever measure of coach that John Shire is as a rookie head coach, he's going to have his guys' attention, and they'll give Virginia a good shot. Just because they're coming off of an ugly loss. Virginia only lost by 6 at Virginia Tech, but for us, that was an ugly loss because Virginia didn't play good defense and really struggled on offense for a long stretch of that game, even though it was only a 6-point game. Look how good Virginia played last night. That's the thing. When a team is coming off of a loss that they perceive to be a bad loss, a good team will come back and play well their very next time out.
Yeah, and Virginia is a team that could potentially, and this is something that I was reading today about Duke's being a team that's really season maybe tournament wise may not be on the ranks right now, but they're coming into Charlottesville playing a Virginia team that could just totally dissect Duke.
Oh yeah,
and leave on a 2-game losing streak, and then where do you go?
Well, that's okay. So when you say that and lay that out, looking at the resume right now, resume doesn't suggest anything about being close to the periphery of being on the bubble or anything like. They're not close in that sense. But yeah, they lose this game after losing the Miami game. Then yes, then the narrative changes for Duke. Then that schedule coming down the stretch gets more interesting for them. I didn't look at their schedule in depth. We were looking at North Carolina's
Well,
schedule.
it's not difficult. They do have a game against Notre Dame, and I think they play
at Syracuse. Syracuse plays well at home. They lost to Virginia, but they played us really tough.
And they're going to respond to Duke. Duke's going to bring a level of intensity to the Carrier Dome or whatever they call it now. They're going to bring out the best in the Qs. Let's put it that way.
After they play us on Saturday, then they have 1, 2, 3, 4 of their next 5 then are at home, and that's Notre Dame and Louisville among them. Now Virginia Tech, they lost to Virginia Tech first time, but they'll have something in their hearts for Virginia Tech on the 25th, and then they got blown out by State, and they play State at home. They have the rematch with State, so they have 2 rematches with teams that beat them. But yeah, if they lose on Saturday, Virginia. They have the chance to lick their wounds just with the easy schedule of Notre Dame, Syracuse, Louisville before they finish with Virginia Tech, State, and Carolina at Carolina the final time. So even a loss on Saturday, they'd be 17-8. They'll win those next 3, no matter how bad they might play in those 3. They will not lose to Notre Dame, Syracuse, or Louisville. And so they're still going to be a 20-win team going in that last stretch. But can this Duke team? Duke doesn't play to get in the NCAA tournament. Duke plays to win the NCAA tournament. They've only won one in the last how many ever years. But their fans, their donors, they don't pay all that money for Duke basketball to just get in the tournament. If they can't play with Virginia on Saturday, and the way the 2 teams are trending right now, Virginia, I like Virginia's chances just from the way they're trending. If they can't hang with a Virginia team on Saturday, yeah, you have to wonder about this Duke team's ability to win, a few games in March and play some special ones in the NCAA tournament.
So to change the course just a little, we talked about Duke and their the schedule remaining schedule. For those that are making a trip down to Greensboro, it looks like hopefully Virginia would finish in the top 4, which would play your way out of Tuesday and Wednesday, right? Think about a potential Wednesday matinee game that has Duke and Carolina in it, because both of those teams are clearly capable of finishing out of the top 4.
Oh yeah, right now
So it could give the Greensboro Coliseum a whole different feel. We've been there on Tuesday nights and Wednesdays. It's empty, but all of a sudden you throw Duke, Carolina into the mix, then it's whether they're having a great season or not, it's going to change the whole atmosphere of the Greensboro Coliseum.
There's still some games to play tonight, but basically by the time we get to the weekend, most teams have either 6 or 7 games to play to get to the end of the regular season. Right now, there are 4 teams with 10 wins: Virginia, Pitt, Clemson, Miami. That's no one had that parlay back in November.
Well, they didn't have Virginia.
But they didn't have that. They didn't have those 4. Is what I'm saying. They
right.
certainly had Virginia. That parlay though, you weren't playing that on your bingo card. Then it's NC State with 9. Then it's Duke with 8. Wake Forest with 8. I mean, yeah, at this stage, especially if Duke loses, playing on Wednesday or Thursday or Tuesday in the ACC tournament is more for the fans than anything else. But yeah, Duke at 8-5, Carolina at 7-6. They're definitely playing on Wednesday. And right now, the next 4, let's just say, are the Carolina schools. It's NC State, Duke, Wake, and Carolina are the next 4. Syracuse in the mix for that. Florida State, surprisingly, is sort of on the fringe of the mix for that. Boston College has Virginia Tech. Here's a funny one, Scott. I wrote a preview of this game yesterday. So Boston College, Virginia Tech. Boston College is ahead of Virginia Tech in the ACC standings. There's no way that Boston College is a better team, but they're ahead of them in the standings right now.
Well, they did beat Tech in Boston.
They did, but season wide. Even looking at the Ken Palm, Ken Palm has Boston College 178. They have Virginia Tech 47. The metrics website there. So, but it's just one of those things. It's also the unbalanced schedule has an effect here. As far as that goes, I mean, no doubt that Pitt and Clemson, have they're 10-3, and I don't want to be the guy saying the unbalanced schedule. I don't really, but they have had a weaker in conference schedule. Certainly Boston College has, Florida State has. But that said, yeah, they lock them into the seedings, and we may have to get down there earlier that week, Scott, than we had planned. We may have to get down there Wednesday at noon so we can see all the marquee teams, because some of the marquee teams are certainly going to be playing on that Wednesday.
Well, I think if we twist our arms, we'll make that sacrifice.
We probably we'll linger in on Tuesday night, because right now it's funny, Tuesday night. I guess Tuesday's still the bottom 16.
Tuesday night should probably they should not allow children into those games.
There's an afternoon game and I think 2 night games, usually the way it goes. Right now, the bottom 6, it's Florida State, Boston College, Virginia Tech, Notre Dame, Georgia Tech, and Louisville. Now, there is a clear line of demarcation between Virginia Tech at 4-8, and then there's Notre Dame, Georgia Tech, and Louisville. Notre Dame 2 wins in conference. Georgia Tech has 1. Louisville has 1. I mean, there was the 3 games on Tuesday. If it's possible, Scott, they'll be even worse than normal, because no way Notre Dame, Georgia Tech, or Louisville wins a game on Tuesday in the ACC tournament. So, I mean, it's already bad quality basketball because they're the worst 6 teams in the conference. But basically, I'll borrow a term from wrestling, which I love, pro wrestling. All 3 of those are squash matches. So, don't tune in. Don't drive down. If you drive down early, just find a good place to eat. And we'll tell you the score Tuesday night after we get the emails from the ACC, because we probably won't be there either, watching the games anyway.
Yeah. You think Louisville is going to go down as the worst team in the history of the ACC?
I'm really upset
because there's never been a 20-loss team.
Well, they beat Georgia Tech.
Right. Excuse me, but
That's what I'm
there's never
upset.
been a 19-loss team.
I'm upset that Georgia Tech could not do what everyone else has done this year. Georgia Tech is so bad that they lost to Louisville. So I think it's safe to say that we have our best worst pair of teams ever in Georgia Tech and Louisville. But I mean, Louisville's 3-21. They're 1-12 in the ACC. They're 301 in Ken Palm. The idea that an ACC team is 301. I mean, Georgia Tech's 207 in Ken Palm.
And Chris, they play Louisville is in, some people would say the mecca of college basketball in the Bluegrass State. They play in the Yum Center, which I've been in numerous times. It is a fabulous arena. What in the world is going on at Louisville that they have bottomed out this bad?
Well, so I just was talking about how, okay, so we have among our teams in the ACC this year from a Ken Palm perspective, Florida State's 169, Boston College 178, Notre Dame 171, Georgia Tech 207, Louisville 301. I went back, I clicked on a button, 2019. The worst team from a Ken Palm standpoint, we had one team at 174, Wake Forest. After that, it was Boston College all the way at 127. So this year, the bottom of the ACC, I mean, we got 5 teams under 169. We had one team under 169 in 2019. Then on the other side of that, you've got, I mean, even Virginia Tech at 14-9, 4-8 in the conference is 47. Syracuse is 85. I mean, so we don't have Virginia actually in Ken Palm is 14 right now, even though in the national polls a lot higher. The top of the league isn't, I mean, the ACC is being dragged down basically by
The bottom.
our bottom teams are awful. And no one, I can't imagine that there's, if I clicked on every year from the last 20 years, we're not going to find anybody close to 301 in Ken Palm. I'm clicking through real quick. I'm not, Pitt, the year they were 0-18 in the ACC, they were 227 in Ken Palm. They actually won 8 games that year. I thought there was another year they were 0-8. Boston College was 0-18 in 2016. They were 225. So this is a historically bad Power 5 team in Louisville. And yeah, so your question was, how can they do that? I mean, I don't want to blame the current coach, the first-year coach, Kenny Payne. He was left nothing by the horrible tenure of Chris Mack. Chris Mack, this season's record should go on Chris Mack's career record. They shouldn't saddle Kenny Payne with this. This is what hiring Chris Mack wrought upon Louisville basketball. This is the sins of hiring Chris Mack a few years ago to be the coach. Now Louisville's having to pay for that. This is the same athletics program though that hired Bobby Petrino after they had already gotten rid of Bobby Petrino. I mean, this is not a Louisville program that the athletics department seems to know what it's doing. And they certainly don't in this money sport of basketball, which is they're playing in front of half-empty houses now in that beautiful arena. That's just unconscionable.
So what you're saying is, look out, Rick Pitino could be back on the sidelines. They hired Bobby Petrino back.
They did. No, I don't know what the internal situation is down there at Louisville in terms of, are there whispers around the program that Kenny Payne is just not relating to these guys, or is it a factor of that plus the lack of talent because of all the problems that Chris Mack left, or is it entirely the lack of talent and they're trying to rebuild? But I would like to think, outside looking in without having paid any attention to Louisville this year for good reason why they're 301 in the Ken Palm, that even if there had been a talent drain, it would not be this dramatic. I mean, Louisville's Louisville. I mean, if the guys are leaving, you can go and say, hey, come transfer in here and play.
The transfer portal, you have instant. You can turn over your roster instantly.
And it's not like, Scott, Louisville is a hard school to get guys into.
No.
So it's not. So yeah, maybe Kenny Payne's a one and done. I mean, without having examined it further, Virginia's got 2 with them coming up.
Yeah, if you look at Virginia's remaining schedule, 2 with Louisville, 1 with Notre Dame, I would assume. That's 3. Those are
Boston College on the road.
Boston College. Those should be 4 almost
relatively easy wins. Yeah.
positively easy wins. Those four,
I mean,
that puts you at 14. That's definitely going to get you in the top four.
and all you got to do is split Carolina and Clemson's at home.
Yeah.
You know, if you split those two, go 5-1, you're 15-5. Worst case scenario, and that's you know, if you beat Duke this weekend and go 5-1, you haven't really done much. And if you go 5-1 down the stretch after Duke this weekend, if you go 5-1 against that 6-game schedule, you don't have to have done much to go 5-1. You don't have to be the best team in the world to go 5-1 against that stretch. And then you play the ACC tournament. So yeah, this is,
you know, it's prestige. I would love to win the regular season ACC tournament, but just making the top four, finishing in the top four, so you can avoid having to play 4 consecutive nights.
Well, and what that does for you too, because we know that the important games are the following week, starting the following week. You know, I mean, I know people don't like me saying this, fans don't like me saying this, but the last 3 ACC teams to win the NCAA tournament lost in the semifinals of the ACC tournament. And they were they were all 3 teams that had actually gotten those double byes. So they only played 2 games in the ACC tournament. The less wear and tear you put on your team's legs in the ACC tournament, the better your chances are that next week in the NCAA tournament. I mean, Virginia 2018, it's no excuse. The loss to NBC was other factors too. DeAndre Hunter. I mean, I'll heap on the excuses. DeAndre Hunter was not there, but Virginia played 3 games that weekend as well. You know, they played 3 games in Brooklyn that weekend. The Carolina team that won the title, the Duke team that won the title, the Virginia team that won the title, all lost in the semifinals of the ACC tournament. So I'm not saying I want us to go down there and watch Virginia lose a game. Obviously, when you're there as a player, a coach, a writer, a fan, you want to win those games. But yeah, if you only have to play on Thursday, you don't have to get down there a day earlier. Even if you win all 3 of your games, play those 3 games. That's just one less day of wear and tear on your team's legs. If you have to play on Wednesday. Virginia Tech last year had that historical, for their fans, magical run to the ACC tournament championship. They won in Brooklyn again. You know, for the tournament was back there last year. They went and laid an egg in their first and only NCAA tournament game with that group. So how special really is it to win the ACC tournament when you go? You know, they played Texas, I think it was, in that first round game last year, and they were never in that game. You could tell that they
were spent.
They still had nothing, even though they had a few days off. They had nothing in the tank, and so
there's a lot too. It's not all physical energy. It's emotional.
Yeah, and they had to.
And they were spent.
They won the first game they won last year. That Wednesday game they won at the buzzer in overtime. Right, they had to hit a 3 at the buzzer to win that game. So, I mean, they had to work their asses off to get in that tournament. If you want to be like the situation Virginia seems like it's in right now, which is, you know, hold serve, win games, get to Greensboro, play at 12 o'clock on Thursday, play at 7 o'clock on Friday. If you win, play at 8 o'clock on Saturday. But yeah, the least drama, the least amount of drama possible is best for this Virginia team.
Yeah, from an old school person like me that remembers going to the ACC tournament when the ACC had 8 teams.
Uh-huh.
And one year, a couple of years, they had 7.
Yes.
Because South Carolina dropped out and went to the SEC.
Before Georgia Tech came in, yeah.
Right. And I think the NCAA tournament was maybe 32 teams.
Oh, yeah.
So winning the ACC championship, a la Wally Walker.
76 team, yeah.
That was magical.
That meant a lot, yeah.
And that was pretty much the zenith of what you strive for, and it was just a prestige. Now it really doesn't have all that, because you know that you're going to get to the tournament unless you just have to win the ACC tournament. You're going to make it to the NCAA tournament. It does take a little bit of shine off of it, but for old people like me, it's still bragging rights to say we were tournament champions. It
is, and that's what I say too. No one goes out there. I'm the analyst telling you that the last 3 ACC teams who won NCAA tournaments lost in the semifinals of the ACC tournament. None of those teams played those games trying to lose the games. They could go home early.
We were there. I mean,
we were there for all 3 of those. Actually,
that championship game is those teams are going at it pretty darn hard.
That Virginia team that won the 2019 title lost to Florida State that night, and that was a game. Florida State controlled that game from the tip. I mean, I think the final score was maybe around 10-point win for Florida State, but that was a frustrating night for Virginia, and nobody on the Virginia side had fun that night. I mean, we were in the locker room afterwards. Nobody was happy that night that they lost that game.
They weren't happy about going home.
No, and so. But yeah, your point was your bigger point was, you want to play your first game as late as possible, in terms of days. And so, this Virginia team, when you look at the schedule, I mean, this game with Duke, win that game, you're holding serve, winning a game that you're scheduled, that you're favored to win, against a good team, but still you're favored to win because you're at home. Go 5-1 in that stretch, down the stretch, and go in there with a 16-4 record, and you're either the 1 or 2 seed. Selfishly now, if you're a fan, and Scott and I straddle the line of fan and writer, I think you want to play. We want to play at 12 o'clock on Thursday.
I don't straddle that line.
Well, you write. You have a byline. Yeah, you straddle the line not nearly as well as I do, but you're still, you have a toe at least on the line.
I've got a toe hanging on.
You got your pinky toe on one of your feet on the line. But you want to play at 12. If the 1 seed plays at 12 and the 2 seed plays at 9. No, excuse me. The 2 seed plays at 7. 3 seed plays at 9.
You want to be a noon game on Thursday.
You don't want to be sitting there all day thinking about the game that you are there to watch. You want to actually.
You're playing a team that has already played 80 minutes of basketball.
Well, not necessarily. If you're the 1 seed playing the 8 seed, they've actually.
Yeah, you could. Yeah,
they just played the day before.
But you're playing a team that's already played it.
Oh, they've already played, and they played 24 hours before, and
right.
They're playing in that game for a reason because they played their way into that 8-9 game. So no, but it's more that you just want to get your game over with, and then you can write your story or two for us, and then. Hit the town or come back and watch the games at night and just root against Duke and Carolina if they're still there. And if they might not be, they're playing on Wednesday this year, it looks like. But yeah, you're kind of just picking favorites. You're having fun watching basketball. If you're waiting till the night game, you don't enjoy those afternoon games because all you're thinking about is okay, Virginia's got a game. So, but yeah, these are all good problems to have, Scott, because it's February 8th. We're literally less than a month away now. The tournament starts on March 7th. We're getting to that time of year as far as the rubber getting ready to hit the road.
Yeah, time to get the suitcase out.
It is. Well, we've been at this for about an hour, so I think it might be time to wrap ourselves up here. Scott, thank you. This has been fun as always. We didn't even talk about your Casey Morsell story. I'll just tease it and say for our listeners out there, damn, we just talked for an hour. I didn't talk about your Casey Morsell story. Scott caught up with Casey Morsell last night after the game. It's a really good column. Good detail.
Great kid, Chris. Great kid, and I feel sorry that he got an earful, but he seemed to take it pretty well.
He earned it, though. I mean, to his credit, he left Virginia. He was not playing well last night. He was a thorn in our side. So, I'm happy in that sense. Okay, especially because Virginia won the game. I'm really happy for him. He had a good game last night because that kind of completes the circle for him. And actually, great comments from Tony Bennett after the game. Read Scott's column. It's on the Augusta Free Press front page. We'll keep it up there for a couple of days, too. But a great little insight into Casey, and it was Scott one-on-one with Casey. So this is not anything anybody else had. But yeah, so get into that. We've got the observations from last night's game. I had a story on the defense and getting a deep dive into the numbers. I had a deep dive into Kadin Shedrick. Some things we talked about on the podcast, obviously. There's also that football story that I wrote that lots of people have read about and have commented on. That's still there if you haven't read it or if you want to read it again. And Jerry Ratcliffe and I will get together on a podcast tomorrow and we'll talk some more Virginia stuff. Jeff Fife's going to join me on Friday. Jeff's going to take the fan perspective and just ask me lots of questions about Virginia basketball primarily, but a little bit of football as well. And then Saturday we got Virginia and Duke, 4:00 in JPJ. Scott and I will be there and look for our game previews. And then also, of course, we'll be there courtside. So in any case, thanks to Scott. Thanks to you for listening. If you have any questions for me, anything for us to write about in the future, email me at chris@augustafreepress.com.